everyone, this is Keri McCourt from the Phantom Regiment, and I'm going to react to my headcam from our 2024 show called Mind. Thank you to Jonathan for always giving me the starting tempo of the show. So, interesting tidbit about me and how Phantom Regiment likes to conduct. I like to think of our style as a hybrid between concert and orchestra conducting and your typical drum major style. There's a lot of expression, there's a lot of left-hand independence, and right at the beginning of the show, if you watch my head cam, you'll notice that I'm only conducting with my baton hand. There's a lot of people who think that drum majors should mirror all the time. There are people who believe that if you're a drum major, you need to make all of your patterns bigger so the ensemble can see you. I personally don't think that way. I think if it's appropriate, like in this case, only the front ensemble was playing. No one on the field was even looking at me because they were doing choreography. So mirroring or conducting with both hands, I didn't really think was necessary. I'm also personally a huge fan of conducting small. I think it can be really effective, especially when you want to bring out those bigger moments. Adding your left hand back in after using only one hand literally doubles the size of your pattern. So if you want to have a big dynamic change from small to big, go from one hand to two if appropriate. This is my favorite part when the cubes start to come apart. So now I'm about to bring in two hands because the horn line comes in. Whenever the full ensemble is playing, that's when mirroring is definitely necessary. So that part of the show right there where it transitions from my stop time, my stopped beat pattern right into the bouncy low tuba feature. I think that's a really good example of how we do so many different styles, so many different things to try to really pull the musicality out of the ensemble. We worked on this section a lot. fun fact, so we would actually spend an entire 4-hour block just working on that part. It was insane. Their drill is all over the place. The music is syncopated. They're all over the field. It's very spread out. There were a couple times every now and then in rehearsals or in shows where if I noticed maybe if the trumpets were focusing too much on looking at the field and not as much time looking at me, I would actually go like this to them to make sure they had their eyes on me. So that whole hornline feature, we called it the flick because it was at letter F, so the F lick, the flick. We spent, just like the last section we actually called the hucka chucka. Just like the hucka chucka, we would spend hours on this every single day, starting with 1 note, then 5 notes, then 9 notes, then 13 notes, doing that every single day, measure by measure, until we got through the entire flick. And I mean, clearly the work showed. Oh, and I think the hardest part about working on the flick for me, obviously my job is very different than the actual hornline players who were playing the lick, because that finger dexterity, I mean, I haven't played mellophone in years. I can't even imagine doing that. Because you have to be so exact with your ictus in moments like this, they were all the way over on the 35, so they were far away from me. They had to stay together. There were dutters in the back, there were dutters in the middle, making sure people could see me, making sure Claire was lining up. But when we would spend hours at a time working on the flick, the burn I felt in my forearm, because it was essentially just wrist isolations. I tried to keep my pattern very small for this moment to make sure everything was very exact. There was very little room for interpretation on the hornline side. I'm so proud of the mellophones for their improvement on the drill in this section. The flags look so good here. If you listen closely, you might be able to hear in my headcam video me going that's something that I did, was tongue clicks or some kind of hissing, only loud enough so I could hear it, nobody else. And that way also, instead of counting out loud or dutting to myself, you can't see my mouth move, so that doesn't hinder my facial expression. Sometimes you just need something more audible than just counting in your head to keep time, and that's okay. That's my friend Micah playing the mellophone solo. all the cubes come together and we call that the space station. That hit in the show was so challenging because the horn line was all the way at the back hash, and they had to line up with the front ensemble, or more so the front ensemble had to line up with what they heard from the horn line. And you can imagine how difficult it was with the sound delay, them watching me, and it sounded about a beat and a half behind by the time it got up to me. So I was really relying on my internal tempo, trying to drive the tempo, not letting the horn line drag me. It took a lot of work lining up between me, the horn line, and the front ensemble, but once we got it locked in and once we got it consistent, it was honestly magic. It was space magic. Oh, I loved this style change that went from the ballad right into Fly or Die. And again, we went from 2 hands when the horn line was playing to 1 because it's just the drum line. The drum line doesn't really look at me anyways, and the horn line, they're doing choreography. So this is an instance where 1 hand is appropriate, and now that the horn line's about to come back in, I'm about to bring in my second hand as a cue. I always tell people to not sing or count or mouth things while they're conducting, again, because it takes away from the facial expressions. But sometimes I did be singing during this section because it was so much fun. It was so groovy. Same thing here. When it went back and forth between the entire horn line to just the duet or solos that were going on at the time with Ben, the trombone soloist, and Liam, the euphonium soloist, I would switch back and forth between 2 hands with the full ensemble and just my baton hand with the soloist. They were close enough to where they could see my baton hand clearly. And again, it's that bringing in the second hand that really makes a huge dynamic difference, and it can also act as a cue as well. Something that I love doing also is whenever there are those unison, like ba 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 boo da boo da, I loved like actually stopping time. 1 stop, 3 stop, 1 3 4 1. That was one of my favorite parts to conduct of the show. I mean, this whole movement was so much fun. Similar to Phantom 1989, New World Symphony. There's a moment like that too where doing stop time is just so much fun. This was so hard to line up. The challenge with this movement specifically was how the horn line was spread all over the field the entire time. We actually went section by section, all those different interjections that the horn line has between the solos. We worked on those like beat by beat, trying to see how much the performers had to anticipate my hands, depending on where they were. We went cube by cube, beat by beat. It was a lot of work, but it really paid off. This was so much fun to work on. This is all still one hand. Two hands. One hand. 1, 3, 1. This looks fun. I still am just in awe of the hornline, the color guard, the front ensemble, the drumline, everyone who was running around, literally running around at double tempo, and then they just pick up their horns and they play that ending. And if you see the color guard, there's rifles, there's sabers, and then there's like mini cubes also, and they're just like spinning the cubes, and they were told by their staff, if you have a cube, you have to pretend like you are trying to sell that cube. And I loved watching one of our color guard section leaders, Erin Edkins, shout out to Team England, because she literally looked like she was like trying to sell a new car with her cube. Our percussion is so good. So something about this movement, pillars, there was a lot going on the field. Same thing with surfacing, how there was a lot of experimenting with how the cubes move, how fast can they turn the cubes. They have to line it up from literally the 10-yard line to the other 10. And it all had to match up perfectly, all while this crazy percussion feature is going on. And they improved so much, especially shout out to our ghost bass section this year. They were amazing. It was especially hard for me to keep track because it's a lot to think about, and sometimes I would look at the cube spin and get a little distracted. So something going back a little bit, we had the, right there where the snare drums had that unison, well actually the whole battery had that unison like, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Really emphasizing the beat ones there is gonna be super duper important, not only because that is like the accented beat of their part, but the horn line they are literally about to play after doing insane choreography, lifting the cubes, putting them on their Lazy Susan things. So those measures leading up to their entrance are super important. Another moment where the whole horn line is playing and they're spread out across the whole field. Style change. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to breathe when you cue. Whenever, if you are a wind player, then you know that before you enter, you have to take a breath, obviously, or else you won't be able to play. If you're not a wind instrument player, then you might not think about how your breathing lines up with what you're playing. And as a conductor, I like to think about, so if I was the person playing the instrument, where are they gonna breathe? Usually a beat, maybe if it's a double breath, 2 beats before they actually articulate the note. In this case, they had the 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, ba, ba, ba. So I breathe with them. Again, they're starting together and they're pulling out. So as they get farther from the 50, farther from the drum line, as the horn line gets farther away and we go into our Z pole and our company front, they actually have to change how they anticipate the hands. They have, or change how they interpret the hands. They have to anticipate the beat a little bit earlier than I actually hit my ictus, in order for the sound to not get delayed by the time it gets to the audience. The biggest challenge for me in this section, especially with the 3/4, the very consistent 3/4 feel going on in Moonlight Sonata, was having large downbeats, large beat ones, to really emphasize boom, boom. This is the tempo, just like a waltz. Let's get back a little bit so I can hear the whole big hit. Yeah, and I go into a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 at that mellow sustain, to really emphasize that it is a drawn out sustain. It builds suspense, not just in the ensemble, but in the performers as well. I love this part. The one feel, but really driving the one feel, making sure you're subdividing in your head. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Something about that ending especially, because it's so long, it's your classic Phantom Regiment ending, just when you think it's gonna be over, we keep going. And that's after they are literally running around during the pillars section. They are lifting the cubes onto the Lazy Susans. They're spinning the props. They are Z pulling across the field. They are jazz running while playing. It's natural that they would start to get winded. They would start to get fatigued toward the end. And in order to encourage them to not let the sound die out, I really had to bring the intensity there. So I put all of my energy, every single rep, especially for this closer in, to encourage the ensemble to not give up either. Because when they see their conductor, their drum major, giving it their all, that gives them the confidence that they can keep going too. I think there were a couple of times where I even I gave them more, told them come on, because they're just so amazing. What they did was actually superhuman. I have to watch it again. And off. And immediately turn around. And the reason I made that choice, I didn't even consult with staff before our first show or our first run through, when it's the immediate cut off, rebound, and just turn, acknowledge the audience. Part of that was an attitude thing, a character thing. In my opinion, the show doesn't start, when the first note is played. The show starts the second you cross the end zone and you enter the field. For me, I get in character. I actually come up with a plot in my head throughout the entire show. I tell my students, if the music that you're playing is like the background music to a movie, what would the characters in the movie be doing? What would their faces look like? That's how I pulled inspiration, so I knew what, not just facial expressions, but actual energy or aura to put onto the field. So for example, the very beginning of the show, it starts with Moonlight Sonata. It's dark, it's in a minor key, and it's just slowly building suspense. So I started that. The second I would step onto the field, I was in my game face. I was serious. My salute at the end, I turn around and I'm showing the audience, you're about to watch something serious. You're not about to watch something that is in a major key or is a lighthearted and fluffy. You're about to watch something that is, it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit mysterious. And then at the end, after we just did all of that, who wouldn't want to turn around and see the audience reaction to that? But after all of that work that we put in, day in and day out of that show, that physically, mentally, emotionally exhaustive show, all I wanted to do was be like, okay, 1, 2, cut off, release, bow, yep, look at what we just did. I knew that as soon as we added the extended ending, that the audience would be on their feet before the show was even over. And that was just kind of my like, yeah, we know what we did. I had so much fun reacting to my headcam. I haven't watched it since I posted it. I hope you enjoyed, and if there are any questions, leave them in the comments. Thank you.